First off, I have to pay my respects to ANBERNIC. Over the last few months, I have absolutely slighted their products. The RG553 I hated, the 353P was okay, and then their release of the Win600 just finished me off, and I even said in the video that I hate where ANBERNIC is heading, yet they still send out their new products to me even after some temporary blacklisting, which is noble of them, seeing as my track record of annoying them is pretty high. So fair play ANBERNIC, I appreciate the professionalism, and now here we are with their latest product titled the RG353V, a similar product to their ever so popular 351V, which I still think is a superb handheld in comparison to this. Before I jump into the review, I'd like to share today's sponsor. Published every month, Wireframe is the unique magazine that lifts the lid on video games. Aimed at gamers and artists who want to go behind the scenes of their favorite hobby, Wireframe looks at how games are made, who makes them, and thanks to their unique toolbox section, shows you how to make games of your own. Every issue is packed with in-depth features, news, reviews, and previews, plus lively opinion pieces from developers and key industry figures. Want to know what it's like to make one of the most reviled games of all time? Keen to find out more about the untold stories behind classics like Monkey Island, Castlevania, or Dead Space? You'll find all this and more every month in Wireframe magazine. To subscribe, visit wfmag.cc/retrododo, or you can press the link in the description or the pinned comment section below. A big thanks to Wireframe for sponsoring this video, it's beyond appreciated. Now, as soon as I lifted the RG353V from the box, I was immediately surprised at how compact this device is. It fits in the palm of my hand perfectly and is far smaller than its larger brother. I was also instantly taken in by the two analog sticks that look monstrously out of place, so much so that it just looks wrong, in a way. Especially when you consider what this device can do. It's pretty much capped at Dreamcast emulation because of the RK3566 CPU, meaning there's very little games that require use of both analog sticks anyway. But I guess it would have looked even more out of place with a single stick? Who knows? But that said, when using them, it's not as much as a problem as I thought they would be. My index fingers secure the position of the handheld, allowing me full control of the console when using them. So actually I can't really hate them. And yes, before I forget, they do have R3 and L3 functionality. The action buttons are bouncy, stay in their place, and do not rattle when shaken. The large D-pad feels great too, which has always been a thing with ANBERNIC devices. Between these you have your function button, start select, and your speaker grill, which is perfectly located in my opinion and never gets covered by my fingers. A much welcome upgrade is the screen. ANBERNIC has added a 3.5-inch IPS touchscreen display with a resolution of 640 by 480, and I must admit, it's a stunning bright display which I have very little complaints about. The touch sensitivity is near flawless too, allowing movement throughout the Android OS as easy as it is on a smartphone, and to think that this is on a $112 handheld. Around the sides of the device you will find your other buttons and ports such as on-off, reset, volume, 2 SD card slots, as well as your headphone jack, mini HDMI out, and 2 USB-C ports. You can tell some basic research went into positioning of these buttons. Typically with other ANBERNIC handhelds, they just seem to scatter them across the device randomly, but not on the RG353V here. Now moving on to a part of the exterior that I really dislike, and that's the shoulder buttons. They're not great at all, in my honest opinion. It feels like they've put very little planning into the location and quality of these shoulder buttons. For example, because they're not stacked, you have to reach over the R1 and L1 buttons to get to R2 and L2. This forces me to accidentally push the wrong buttons because they're so close together, and also because they're sitting so damn close to the trigger underneath the shell. In fact, these could be the most fragile shoulder buttons I have ever tested. A light touch will activate them unnecessarily, making them unreliable and awkward to use. I wish they would have just used buttons with longer travel time, possibly even stacked, and ones that are of far better build quality that fit tighter into the shell so they don't rattle or move around excessively. The 3200 mAh battery sits just under the shoulder buttons, adding nice weight to the lower half and adds plenty of thickness to give you a good grip when playing on the go. With all of that in combination, it admittedly creates a good looking handheld that I would class as pocket friendly. Just. Any bigger and it would have to be in your backpack. The screen is great quality, the buttons are perfectly located, and the sizing makes it a good handheld to take with you on short or even long trips away. Now let's talk about the gaming experience. Some of you may not know that there are actually two variants of this handheld. You have the basic edition, which has 2 GB of RAM and features the ability to have Linux and Android as your operating system, whereas the cheaper RG353VS version has just 1 GB of RAM, no touchscreen, and just Linux as an operating system, which is $30 less. For the extra $30, I highly recommend upgrading to the base RG353V. It comes with enough upgrades to make the increase in price worth it. The 1 GB of extra RAM adds some increased performance, but the Android OS features some extras that adds to the overall experience of using this device, which isn't something I typically say because I love the Linux OS on my retro handhelds. It's easy to use, easy to understand, and you can typically give it to a child to play on. But there's a few reasons why I have moved to playing purely on Android on this RG353V. Firstly, the touchscreen is a delight to use and helps with general Android setup. And ANBERNIC has also added some shortcuts to allow you to jump between menus and switch your ABXY button layouts on the fly. For example, you can toggle the ANBERNIC button that drops you into the pre-made menu that organizes all of your games for you. Great for those of you that hate moving around different applications and messing with Android. There's also a Nintendo and Xbox button that changes up the A-B orientation depending on what gaming style you like to use, and if you prefer switching between them on certain consoles. It's these small additions on top of the touchscreen capabilities that adds value to using Android over Linux, in my opinion, and it's the first time I have seen ANBERNIC tinker with such features, which surprises me because they often overlook small things like this. But I think they're seeing competitors do this and be complimented on it, so they kind of want to be seen as doing the same. The RG353V uses the same RK3566 chipset as the RG353P, which, if you watched our review, was capped at Dreamcast emulation, and the same goes for this device because it's almost exactly the same internally. Your old consoles like NES, SNES, Game Boy Advance and PS1 will play flawlessly on this thing, and honestly, so it should. That level of emulation has been around for years for much cheaper. I actually had a very pleasant experience playing with PlayStation 1 games. The dual analog sticks felt nice to play on, and the 4x3 display just made it look very organic. When I moved on to PSP emulation, most games worked well, but larger games like God of War will require some tinkering and maybe even switching to the Linux OS for slightly better performance. And the same goes for Dreamcast. Many Dreamcast games worked okay on the Linux side, but not so good through the Android operating system, so this will require some tinkering within the settings. I personally hate tinkering. I shouldn't be having to waste time to try and squeeze an extra few frames out of the console, but I know some of you don't mind doing that watch my videos. So for those wanting to buy this for PSP and Dreamcast emulation, you may want to wait it out or take a look at the Retroid Pocket 3, as that is the same price and has slightly better performance. And that's where I move on to the awkward pricing of this device. I do need to mention though that I am impressed that ANBERNIC has priced this lower than I anticipated. So I have to applaud them for that, even though I think the pricing of the Retroid Pocket 3 forced their hand in a way. From what I can tell, it's targeting those that enjoy ANBERNIC products and those that fell in love with the older 351V but want something a little bit more compact with extra modern tech like the touchscreen, the extra analog stick, and a cleaner OS choice in a vertical form factor. But it's up against one of the best $130 handhelds on the market, and that's the Retroid Pocket 3, something that I personally use more than this RG353V. It's because of the slightly better build quality and the larger screen, but I will admit the Pocket 3 is far less portable. Overall, I think ANBERNIC saved themselves with this handheld. It's a great, well-rounded, vertical device that I will undoubtedly use throughout the coming months. I like that they made it pocket friendly, and I appreciate ANBERNIC taking some time to tweak both operating systems alongside a semi-decent chip for retro gaming. ANBERNIC has had 2 steps back this year, but this is their first step forward. Keep going, ANBERNIC. You still have some catching up to do, but fair play, this is a nice handheld.